Hey folks, how are you doing? I'm shooting a video tonight, just kind of a vloggity talking, rambling video. And this one's kind of inspired by a few things. You know, for those of you who know me, Kevin in Japan. I'm from Canada, I live in Japan. And if you follow J vloggers or Japan vloggers, maybe you don't. But if you do, you may be familiar with the big news that one of ours, Softy Papa, Kurt Bell, is going to be leaving Japan in the next 2 months. At the end of February, actually, he's leaving. A month and a half or so. He's leaving Japan. He's heading back to America, and this has been a plan of his for quite some time. It's not really a surprise. In a way, it seems to be almost, because you hear about you hear people talking about these things, and I've talked about before in the past, leaving Japan and going back to Canada, and that's something I'm going to talk about shortly. But it's really been a plan, and he's been really kind of seriously for the last 6 months, kind of focusing on a job, and he got that job, and it's a job in California, and he's going to be moving back, and then eventually his family's going to come and join him, and it's been kind of a goal. And there's a lot of reasons why he talks about heading back to the States, and one of them has to do with kind of like really utilizing his potential. And some people feel that their potential isn't utilized. They can't fully utilize their potential in Japan for many reasons. Maybe, for example, the language barrier, the cultural barriers, different skill sets and expectations. There are people who initially come to Japan and they take jobs as English teachers, for example. They're native English speakers, and it's just something that they plan on being it's a temporary thing, and eventually it becomes not so temporary, and they become kind of resentful about that because they never really like being teachers, but then it becomes a paycheck and it's a job they have to do. And then they find themselves in a situation maybe many years down the road where they've got responsibilities, they've got bills to pay, they've got kids, they've got a mortgage here in Japan. They can't speak Japanese very well, and the only job they're going to be able to basically have is teaching English, and yet they don't like it. I met more than one person like that. I'm not trying to be all like gloomy and stuff here. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are people I've met who've been here for 20 years, 25 years who teach English and love it and have a wonderful life and a great time. And they've got no complaints. Well, everyone's got complaints. Doesn't matter where you live. I'm a Canadian. I love Canada, but if I were living in Canada right now, I'm sure I could have many things to bitch about. One being the weather, the polar vortex. Polar vortex. Yeah. So life isn't perfect anywhere you go. But yeah. So watching Kurt's video, I just finished watching one of those videos where he was talking about some of the anxiety he's having about heading back to America. What if things don't work out? What if his daughter doesn't fit in? His daughter's in junior high school now. What if she doesn't like it? What do they do? What do they do? My wife and I talk about this kind of thing constantly, about heading back. Now, I've made videos before in the past talking about how I want to go back to Canada, and I still do, I've got to admit. There's a possibility I might not. I might end up being here till I'm an old fart. But at the end of the day, I would like to go back to Canada. Got nothing against Japan. It was never the plan to stay here long term. With my wife and I, we basically planned on just staying here for a couple of years. Now, I'm an elementary school teacher. I'm a trained elementary school teacher, kindergarten elementary school teacher, and that's what I do. So the whole teaching thing, I like teaching. Not all situations I've had since I've been here have been ideal. My first job I had for the first 5 years or so was pretty good. Where I'm at right now, well, you know what? It's not really something I'm built for. Let's just say that. And I will kind of allude to something, but without giving any details. I never really give very many details about my job or where I work, and I think that's kind of a good rule of thumb for any vloggers or bloggers out there. Unless you work for yourself, you're a freelancer, or you own your own business, and you have ultimate job security. In the new school year coming up in April, I won't be doing what I'm doing now. I'll just say that. And what I will be doing is something that will be kind of more familiar to me, and I am going to have a lot more control over what I do and a lot less stress, and I'm going to be feeling much better about things. Let's just say that. So there are changes coming up in my life, which I'm very happy about. And that's already set and done. So I'm still going to be living here in Kobe. same house, all that stuff. But I'm going to be, as far as employment goes, doing something different, doing something familiar, and I'm happy about that. Now, another thing too, I mentioned I am a teacher, and I just got some messages on Twitter the other day from a guy he seemed concerned. He watched my video that I made, oh God, probably more than half a year ago. God, actually, I probably made it in the spring of 2013 about me wanting to head back to Canada. I can't remember. Did I make it on the BusanKevin channel or my Jayla Kev channel? I'm not sure. But he said, I'm a teacher in Ontario too, and the job situation here is shit and a half. Like there's no jobs, I mean, at all. And I'm like, oh, I know that. And he's been a supply teacher, which is like a substitute teacher, or an occasional teacher. So an occasional teacher is kind of like basically you work on contract when a teacher goes on maternity leave or this or that, or some kind of leave. You come in and you teach for like a month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months. He's been doing that for like 7 or 8 years now, which is pretty common in the province of Ontario and pretty much across most of Canada. People who graduate from teacher education programs who are substitute teachers for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. People who are good teachers, who are awesome teachers, but there's just a surplus across the country, and that's an issue that's happening in a lot of parts of America too right now. Teacher surpluses. So I was like, yeah, I'm well aware of that actually. So what I'm focusing on, I'm not planning on being a teacher in Canada. I have a Bachelor of Education, I got my license and all that jazz, but I don't plan on being a teacher in Canada because I know that that's a bleak future. I plan on getting into private sector, kind of tech related stuff, tech marketing related stuff, and I'm kind of lining myself up in a direction of starting a master's. Ideally in the spring, but if not later on in the year, maybe towards the fall, a Master's of Education in Information Technology, and basically it'll be gearing me towards teaching people how to teach technology. So teaching teachers how to teach technology, teaching private sector people how to teach technology, a very private sector oriented kind of job. Really based towards and God, my brain is sputtering right now. Educational learning, educational learning. Oh my gosh, my brain. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's it's really geared towards, again, kind of teaching teachers how to use technology, teaching teachers how to teach technology, and a lot of private sector applications. And that's what I would be going for, private sector type things, within big corporations, teaching people how to use technology, this and that. So it's very tech heavy, very tech oriented, the masters. You have to have a basic skill set to get in, which is great because it's all right down my alley. Everything from, like, you have to have certain proficiencies in video editing on multiple platforms, audio editing on multiple platforms, creation of podcasts, creation of all kinds of different things using visual media. Yeah, so it's great. It's kind of right down my alley. So hopefully I will find myself in this program within the year, and I'll be doing it all online, part-time, if I get in. This is an ideal thing. If I don't, I'm going to try to find something similar in scope and style. But yeah, so I'm going to be around for a bit longer in Japan. But I do have aspirations of heading back home. And people are like, why? Why do you want to head back home? Japan's so awesome. It's so perfect. Well, at the end of the day, when you have a family, sometimes it just comes down to the basics, money, A teacher with similar experience to me, who is teaching in Canada and who has like a full-time position, who maybe has been teaching for 10 years, is making more than double what I make. Why shouldn't I aim and strive for a position where I can make a lot more money that benefits my children and my wife and myself, right? Yeah, that's kind of it. That's kind of, at the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to. And that's something that I think once you have a family, you really start to think about. You don't start to think about you start to think about us, the collective, the family. What's best for us? Is it best for my fans who like to watch my YouTube videos with Japan? No, it's not. But at the end of the day, my YouTube income is pretty small. So that doesn't really influence me in a way. I mean, of course, I would continue doing YouTube because I love YouTube, but it would be just you, Kevin in Canada. But yeah, so you start to think in a different way once you have a family. You know, you got to think about what's going to bring more money, because, you know, I'm pushing 40, and, you know, I got to think about retirement. I got to think about my kids when they get older, their university. And, you know, if I could get a job in Canada where I'm making double the money I'm making now, or 2.5 times the money, well, guess what? It's going to be much easier for me to think about retirement in the future. It's going to be easier for me to think about buying a house. It's going to be much easier for me to think about putting my kids through university, all that jazz. So yeah, like Kurt, well, he is leaving, but I do think of leaving. Will it happen? I don't know. Once I do have a master's degree, I'm also open to teaching in universities in Japan. And if I could leave this area where I'm at right now, because it's very competitive in this Kansai area for university positions, most people who who live in like the Osaka, Kobe area, who have masters or PhDs, end up teaching part-time at several universities. I would be willing to leave this area to go somewhere where I can get a full-time position. And then I'm definitely going to have a larger income, more security, and then, you know, if I continue my education past then, the possibility of getting a tenured position, you know, a lot more vacation time, better benefits, that kind of thing. So that's an option too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not discounting that either. So yeah, so thinking about the future, watching Kurt's videos really gets me thinking more about my future and my family and all that stuff. So yeah, there we go on a weeknight here in Japan, thinking about the future, drinking a bit of wine in a whiskey cup glass, because I don't drink whiskey because I hate whiskey. That's true, guys. I hate spirits, man. Ugh, don't like whiskey. Bourbon, gin, scotch, nah, not a fan. Not a fan. I guess a nice single malt scotch I could have like one glass, but that's about all. That's going to take me a while to get through that glass. I was going to be working it for a long time. Yeah, so there you go, guys. Just I wanted to talk, again, I just finished watching Kurt's video talking about some of the stress and panic he's having as it gets closer and closer that he's leaving Japan, and how, I mean, knowing that in April I'm going to be in a different job situation makes me feel more comfortable and relaxed. But yeah, so I mean, I don't have a lot of stress right now, which is good. But you know, I guess maybe I'll have a little bit because I'm applying for a graduate program, and I'll know within the next maybe month and a half or so if I get in. If I don't get in this round, I'll have maybe a little bit of stress, but it's twice a year you can apply for it. Yeah, just worried they might not get some documents in time. I've been dealing with the slowness of Canadian universities and trying to get documents. You send emails and you get no replies. You send more emails, you get no replies. You send more emails, you get no replies. And then eventually you get a reply, and then you send another email, and then there's no replies. Yes, the bureaucracy of Canadian universities. But yeah, guys, so rambling, babbling, wabbling. Yeah, so there we go. So coming up later on this week, we got ourselves a new Mayasa mug, coffee mug collab video, and expect some other things, a variety of different things, and maybe another toy video coming up very soon. I got a vintage toy, which has got a really cool, strong Japanese connection, Japan connection, which I think you're going to find pretty darn groovy. Alright guys, it's a toy that's like 60 years old. Alright, later guys. Kevin here in Japan. Check all the links below, and I hope you are all doing well.